Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, I hope you had a glorious weekend, ladies and gentlemen. I had a good weekend, but man, was it hot here in Florida. I was out in the Gulf of Mexico, and it was some of the hottest weather I remember in a while. Some of it may be due to the Sahara dust storm that is collected over our state and out there. It was like real hazy, and it held the heat in so much. It was so hot, in fact, that when I got back to my home after being gone for about 3 days, the water level in my pool through evaporation had dropped about 6 inches. That's the truth. I mean, it's normally an inch or two at most, but it dropped like 6 inches. And I think I might have dropped about six inches of water out of me as well this weekend. But I hope you had a great time. I did as well. So we're going to get into some interesting stories here today. They're a bit gloomy, actually. Maybe that's why I decided to wear this black shirt today. It's a bit gloomy, the news that is coming out there. It's very hard to find any positive news. Right? And some of that is by design, and some of it certainly is by the times we live in. But the first story we're going to talk about is President Trump actually losing? I mean, if you go by the headlines, Trump can't possibly win. There are even headlines saying that he either should drop out or that he's considering dropout. So it's getting crazy in there. We're going to address some of those issues. And then, of course, Governor Cuomo, our favorite governor, not quite, he says that President Trump is totally in denial in the Trump administration about what's really happening with COVID-19, the virus. So we're going to update you with that. And then we're going to read this opinion piece that was written in the Hill, if we have time, about America becoming a police state. Is it, in fact, becoming a police state? In spite of the, quote, defunding or abolishing the police, are we an actual police state? And if we have time, we're going to debate that as well. But we start with a CNN story. 2020 election, Trump risks defeat with no course correction. It's hard to remember another incumbent president in recent history who has done as little as Donald Trump to try to win re-election. Now, this is what CNN is saying. I would say it's hard to find a president who has done more than Donald Trump to deserve to win re-election. This thing, and this is something, and I'm not saying it is, but it should be in the bag if you think about it. I mean, if people really judge honestly, put their Trump derangement syndrome aside and judge the president simply on the merits of where he has taken this country from the economic depths of depression, of course, up into the pandemic, to economic prosperity across all racial, ethnic, socio-status lines. I mean, no one has done more with less help probably than Donald Trump. Now, the pandemic, yes, it has caused a big-time problem. I don't think you can blame that on President Trump, but we'll get into that in just a moment. But I will say this about the pandemic and Trump's economy, and yes, it is Trump's economy, or it was certainly. We would be in far worse shape, and I rarely hear this talked about on any network, not even conservative one. Think of where we would be economically if we didn't have the Trump economy going into the pandemic, or as some of my listeners call the plandemic. We would be in one heck of a fix. The reason why we can even economically survive this thing, and the question is still out there if we can survive it, but the only reason we have a fighting chance to survive it is because of how great the Trump economy was going into this, as you call it, plandemic. But it says Donald Trump to try to win really in an environment that forecasts a November disaster for the Republicans. Trump continued last week to barrel down a road that seems destined for defeat. So I'm wondering, is CNN trying to give him some advice? Are they trying to pep him up a little bit here and trying to help the president? It might actually be good for their ratings because no one paid attention to CNN until Donald Trump started calling them the fake news. They were actually tanking. And so they may actually want Trump to win re-election, because what kind of stories are they going to have about Joe Biden? God's sakes, if he wins. Last week, they're talking about President Trump here. Last week, he again refused to acknowledge the worsening pandemic or encourage Americans to adopt the simple and effective measure of wearing a mask. They are obsessed on the fact that Donald Trump doesn't wear a mask, even though lives are on the line. I mean, they make it sound like that Donald Trump is the one causing the mask controversy. He's not. The media has caused the mask controversy, and the so-called experts, they've been all over the map on masks. 1 minute, I mean, you don't really need one. The next minute you do, and then they put lives are on the line. So lives are literally on the line about whether or not people are wearing a mask. I guess it doesn't matter whether you can open your business with a key or a brick. I mean, that's kind of the confusing thing now, right? According to the Democratic Party, it seems like, in the mainstream media, it's okay if you open my business with a brick through the window, but me going up there and opening it with a key, let alone defending my business, that's not possible, man. And as far as this mask goes, all you really need to know, and I'm not downplaying wearing a mask. First of all, people don't seem to be wearing them correctly most of the time. But all you really need to know about how serious it is about wearing a mask is look what just happened last week in Washington State, where they made it mandatory for people to wear masks statewide, with an exclusion that people of color basically can have a choice as to whether or not to wear a mask. When the wearing of the mask is based on the skin tone you have, that tells you there's very little science involved in this, and it's all about show, man. I mean, I can't even believe I'm reporting that, but it's true. Check it out. Look it up yourself. He continued talking about President Trump, this CNN article. He continued to use racist language to describe the virus and kindled more disquiet. And by the way, you know what they're referring to as racist language? When he referred to it as the Kung flu again recently. That's racist language to describe the virus. And kindled more disquiet by championing the cause of dead generals, talking about the dead generals on the bases here in the South that were named after dead Confederate generals, with racist past at a time when a majority of the Americans say they hope to stamp out racism. I love that, stamp out racism. So how are you exactly going to stamp out racism? I guess if you rename the bases, you're stamping out racism. I guess if you obliterate, and I've been saying this for a while, but this may melt some of you snowflakes out there that are thinking of supporting the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is trying to obliterate their past, because when they start taking down people who served in the Confederacy as Speaker of the House, like Nancy Pelosi did last week, when you start taking down the statues, tearing them down, you know what all of those statues pretty much, especially Confederate and the Confederate bases and that controversy, whether you believe in naming or not, you know what they all have in common? They all have in common that they're all Democrats, every single one of them. So the Democratic Party is literally trying to obliterate their past. So if you want to do away with all vestiges of slavery, we can have that conversation. Now, I firmly believe that we should celebrate and certainly study the good, the bad, and the ugly of all of our history, period. I mean, to me, good, bad, and ugly. But the Democrats, if you want to do away with all vestiges of slavery, then the Democratic Party has to, at the very least, change its name, because make no mistake about it, the Democratic Party is the party of slavery. They're the ones that put people in chains to start with. They're the ones that fought to keep them in chains, like Joe Biden famously said, they're going to put you back in chains. It's the Democratic Party that put black people in chains to start with. That's just a fact. It may not be a fact you want to listen to, but it is a fact nonetheless. So if you're going to do away with all vestiges of slavery, the Democratic Party's got to go by the wayside, because otherwise you're doing nothing but token stuff. And that's exactly what's happening in our country right now. As terrible as it is to pull down statues all willy-nilly, but I actually think there is a plan in the statues, because some people say, well, they're ignorant out there. They don't even know what they're talking about. And I've made that statement myself, where they are tearing down like the that regiment of soldiers monument. We've shown a monument a few times. I believe it's up in Philadelphia, where that from that movie Glory, if you've ever seen that movie about the entire black regiment that were fighting for the Union Army, trying to help their brethren that were still in chains in the South under Democrats. I'm going to keep reminding you that. But that monument got desecrated. And yes, some of it was ignorant, but some of it I firmly believe is planned, because I believe that the Black Lives Matter, I'm talking about the organization, the Marxist organization that it was founded in, Antifa, they're kind of tied at the hip, all of that, they're bent on destroying America. And they think the best way to do that, or one of the best ways, is to make black Americans feel like there is nothing to be proud of in this country whatsoever. So they want to desecrate stuff like to the Tuskegee Airmen, that black regiment I was just talking about. They want to make black Americans feel like there is zero to be proud of in this country, so that they have no connection to the greatness of America. In fact, they're pushed aside, and some aspects of that are actually true, but there is a lot to be proud of for all Americans in this country, where we were, where we're coming from, and where hopefully we're going. But I believe it is a planned process to make black America feel like they're as disconnected as they possibly could be. But as far as this stamp out racism, if they really want to stamp out racism in America beyond just the Democratic Party going by, let's have some real conversations. I keep hearing that, you know, the Democratic Party talking about our values, our values. Well, think about this, ladies and gentlemen, and you can look this up. You could Google it, but I tell you, Google is of the devil. You could take my word for it, but you don't have to. But look at where the worst school districts in America are, the most failing school districts. Like Baltimore, for instance. It came out about a year ago that in Baltimore, when President Trump was having that S-hole conversation back with the gentleman that died, I can't think of his name right now, it really doesn't matter, God rest his soul, the congressman from Baltimore, might pop in my head in a minute, but they found out that not one, and I'll say this again, not one single student in Baltimore schools was proficient in math and reading. Not one, not a single one. So you go and look at the failing school systems in America, the crime-ridden portions of our inner cities or our cities in general, and every single one of them is run by Democrats. To me, that is about as racist as it gets, to fail the children in school and have people living in crime-ridden neighborhoods. That, ladies and gentlemen, is racist, but no one talks about that at all because it doesn't fit the narrative. That's why you got to listen to shows like John Martin Talks. That's why we need you to spread far and wide. Share our show as much as possible. Give us likes and subscribe on our YouTube channel. Let's spell it all the way out, John Martin Talks. Check us out, because you're only going to get this type of stuff right here on John Martin Talks and networks like we're over, like America's Voice News. It's the only place you're going to get this. Back to the article. One could be forgiven for wondering aloud whether Trump really wants to win the election in November. Well, you know, I mean, first of all, Biden is just outworking Donald Trump, right? Biden is just everywhere. He's going everywhere. He's traveling everywhere. He's not afraid of the Wait a minute. Billy Bob tells me that's not exactly true. In case you hadn't met our psychic sidekick here, Billy Bass, he silently kind of keeps me on track here. His Twitter handle, by the way, it's at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks, another way you can communicate with me. But Billy Bob tells me that Biden ain't coming out the basement hardly. It's President Trump who is trying to get out amongst the people. Is he actually doing it in the best possible way? Do I think that President Trump needs to do more? Yeah, I think so. I do think there is a fair criticism of him that he needs to talk more about where he's going to take the country from this point forward. Yes, he has every right to beat on his old chest a little bit and say, look what I've done. I don't have a problem with that. But people need to have more now. They've always needed this, but more now than ever, maybe we need to know what direction we're going. Probably as much, if not more, than right after the Civil War, because our country was in tatters. And, from a war, we're tearing it apart right now. Some of it from apathy, by the way, because we don't have people stand up. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But President Trump, I think it is a fair criticism of him that he needs to articulate more about what he plans to do in a second term to make America not only great again, but again. So I think that is a true criticism of him. But CNN, man, they're just giving Biden a pass. All these networks give him a pass completely. When was the last time Joe Biden was asked a tough question? I mean, maybe he has been, and I've missed it. Chime in on whatever Facebook page you're watching on now, whether it be Citizens for Trump. Howdy, how are you? Good morning. America's Voice News. We're on there live every day at this time, as well as they rebroadcast our show across their network. We're on Dish Network with America's Voice News, channel 219, Pluto Network, Fire Stick, Roku, Apple TV, download free apps on Android or iPhone, all of that on America's Voice News. And our show is also archived on. But tell me if I'm wrong about this. At least if I'm wrong, not only tell me, but let me know what was the last time, or when was the last time Joe Biden was asked a tough question. Maybe Kamala Harris back in the debate. That might have been it. On Sunday, the president retweeted a video from a recent pro-Trump parade. Boy, is he catching the devil for this. In the Florida community known as the Villages. I live about 30 or 40 miles north of that area myself. Villages, where a supporter driving a golf cart bearing Trump campaign signs repeatedly shouts, "White power." Now, he's shouting that at people who are heckling him, not trying to take it, stand up for him, but that is what's happening. While arguing that anti-Trump protesters standing in the streets. In a tweet, Trump called his supporters great people. Now, President Trump tweeted this out. The video is in it. You could make a case, as the Trump administration has, that they didn't see it. And I can believe that, because I can't imagine they would put that up there if they did see it. But in fairness, maybe I'm going to be a little critical of the president today. Whoever is operating that, and maybe President Trump is doing it all himself, which is probably a mistake as well. You don't hear me often say that he shouldn't be tweeting, but that tweet should have never gone out. I'm not saying the president is racist. I'm not saying he was purposely trying to put that out there. I'm saying it was a mistake to do that, because it simply gives them more gasoline for the fire. And that's one thing the mainstream media doesn't really need any more of. But Trump tweeted out, said, "Thank you for the great people of the Villages. The radical left do-nothing Democrats will fall in the fall. Let's hope so. Corrupt Joe is shot. See you soon," Trump wrote in a tweet sharing video. Now, the reality is, with Biden being a gaffe-a-minute guy, and, they're saying that Trump, see, here's the thing. The media wants you to think that, that's just when Joe Biden does a gaffe, that's just Joe being Joe. But if Donald Trump makes a gaffe, and I think tweeting out that video was clearly a gaffe, that it's deliberate, that President Trump's doing some kind of call sign or something, bird whistle or dog whistle or whatever the heck they call it. I don't even know what that all is, but that it's deliberate. So to me, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say on the one hand that Donald Trump is unhinged and doesn't have any idea what he's doing and is, BS crazy and everything else, but yet he deliberately planned out that tweet. You can't have it both ways, man. It just doesn't work that way. And I'm hoping and praying that not only that they're worried about Donald Trump being unhinged, we need to get the man reelected so he can be unleashed, baby. That's what we need. But he is running in some tough situations. To deny that is a mistake. Presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden seized on Trump's controversial tweet Sunday, saying it echoed the president's assertion that both sides. Now, you talk about double standards. I'm going to say this and then we'll read it further. I've been telling you, there is no double standard. If you watch my show any time, you know it. First of all, if you're new to the show, welcome. Where you been? You're in the right place now. But there is no double standard. There is no double standard. You go, what do you mean? There's only one standard, and that is a standard that Donald Trump and supporters of his, conservatives in general, Tea Party people, MAGA hat, dregs of society, those 15 percenters that are just bad, like Biden said, just bad people. We're held to a standard. The left is held to no standard. They can say and do whatever they want. That's why I say there's not a double standard. There's one standard, and the left isn't held to one. But back to this, it said, this is what Biden said, echoed the president's assertion that both sides were to blame for white supremacist violence in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017, which is a lie. And CNN doesn't call Biden out on this. Biden started his campaign, if you remember a video that he did, he opened up about Charlottesville over a year ago now, I guess, for the 2020 campaign. And it was so bad that Charlottesville told him they didn't want him to. He wanted to do it live, cut it from Charlottesville. They said they didn't want any part of it. But the big lie is that Donald Trump said there were good people on both sides talking about the Nazis and Antifa. That is not what he said. He was talking about the people who were pro taking the General Lee statue down and who were opposed to taking it down. He said there were good people on both sides of that issue. And then he directly went on right after that to say and condemn white supremacists flat out, say there was no room for that in this country, flat out. Go check out the transcripts because you'll never see it on like CNN. But they didn't call out Biden on his lie without evidence, all that kind of stuff. Like I say, there's only one standard, and Biden ain't held to it. The more that Donald Trump is out, the worse he does. This is Biden. Think about this right here. Listen to this quote from Biden. The more that Donald Trump is out, the worse he does. I think it's wonderful he goes out. He goes, I'm being a bit facetious here, he says, because it's dangerous what he's doing with these rallies. He's only had one. But look at the numbers have dropped through the floor. Yeah. So what is Biden saying? The more we see of Trump, the worse it is for him, for Trump, and the less we see of you, Joe, the better it is for you. This is another question I still have put out there that I have not had not one single response. I get trolled all the time on my Facebook sites now, which is a blessing because that means I'm touching a nerve and I'm reaching out. If they're not hating on you, you're probably not doing something right. So you trollers, keep on trolling. And, my supporters, I appreciate you defending me, but don't worry about the trolling. That means things are going right. But I still have yet to hear an answer to this question. Tell me flat out why you were passionate about Joe Biden. Now, I don't want you to tell me why you hate Donald Trump. That's another topic. And I get it. There are people who absolutely hate Donald Trump. I don't agree with you, but I can respect that. But give me a passionate reason to vote for Joe Biden other than you hate Donald Trump. If it's TDS related, that doesn't count. Give me a passionate reason why you support Joe Biden other than he ain't Donald Trump. That's not enough. Republicans, back to this article, Republicans worry about Trump's drag on the ticket. So Republicans are worried, eh? And some of them probably are, to be fair. Worried about what that could mean for the power of their party in Washington. Republicans are increasingly expressing their concerns about the November election, probably anonymously, after largely refusing to criticize the president for months, fearing his backlash from his base. Is that true? Have Republicans not been willing to criticize the president? I hadn't found that to be true. And here's the question, and I mentioned this on Friday's show, and I'm sorry we had some internet problems on Friday. Somebody asked me, that's because you're trying to get out of there and go fishing. No, I'm trying to go fishing, but I get the show first. The show and getting this information out to you. Battling ignorance and apathy is like my top priority. But I went to a meeting of the Republican Party here locally Thursday night. And one of the biggest complaints that were coming from our membership were, where are the Republicans? Besides Trump, they were giving President Trump credit, but where are Republican leaders? And they were talking about Floridians as well. But where are the Republican leaders that are criticizing what is happening in our nation? The destruction of our history, the decimation of our inner cities and burning up people's places of business and churches and everything else. Where are Republicans speaking out on that? And I have to agree with them. As a fellow Republican, and I hope somewhat of a leader, I do it every day here, but where are the Republicans on that? And I agree that Donald Trump seems to be the only one for the most part. There are some exceptions, but by and large, there's been like crickets coming from the Republican Party over what is happening to our nation right now. And they're scared. That's what it is. For instance, here's one here. Senate Majority Whip John Thune, who noted that Trump is already good with the base. I hope so. Adding that the people in the middle will cast a deciding vote in November. And that's true. And I say if true, because here's the thing you got to keep in mind. He's right about it in this sense. If you look at the states that Donald Trump won in, that swung the election his way, like Florida, I'm sure I'll leave some out, like Michigan, Pennsylvania, those types of states. If you look at these states, it was a fairly thin, like 100,000, sometimes a little bit more vote margin. That's very small. So Donald Trump not only has to replicate what he did last time, but I think given the passion, and there was total overconfidence with Clinton. I'm not so sure that the Democrats, even though the polling is showing a lot of confidence, I don't think anybody is really confident in Joe Biden. They might not admit it, but like even Terry McAuliffe, we talked about last week or so, and I told you the best way to see podcast of our show, but he even said in a conference, a Zoom call a week or so ago, that Biden was better off in the basement. This is coming from a former chair of the Democratic Party. But, these people in the middle, it is going to take not only the same coalition that put Trump in, but I think he's got to flip a few more votes his way or get new voters that are coming out, which is extremely difficult to do, by the way, and get them to swing his way. But I would ask, if you're undecided, if you're sitting on the fence, if you're in the middle of the road, and keep in mind, I tell you all the time that the only thing you really find in the middle of the road is dead skunks and possums. But if you're one of those people that are in the middle of the road on the fence, you're not sure which way to go, what do you want? What exactly do you want? Because Trump did, here's the thing. You can hate President Trump personally and still vote for him. I mean, if you really look at it, between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, you got one guy who has run for president for his entire life, who says, I've been in politics for 50 years, and now I have the solution in Joe Biden, who has a hard time Joe Biden could not do this show. And I'm not necessarily bragging on me. I guarantee you Joe Biden could not maintain a coherent thought for 30 minutes, let alone the 48 minutes or to an hour that I do this show. So Joe Biden, you want to host a show? Come on and embarrass yourself. But between Joe Biden, who's been there forever and now says he has the solution, and Donald Trump, who actually was turning our country around, making all boats rise in the economy, I mean, what do you want? Do you want a guy who's proven what he can do and take us out of this mess that we're in now? Because let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, if the economy is good, can't we figure it out ourselves? I mean, do we really need government to figure out everything for us? I guess some people do. The way I look at it, I always talk here, Democrats, especially locally here, it's all about the quality of life. Well, and I agree. The quality of life is absolutely important. But you know what? My quality of life tends to be directly tied to the quality of my purse. My pocketbook. I don't want to get two people confused. My pocket. If I'm flush with cashola, if I've got change, like Bahama said, hope and change, if I got change I can actually spend, I can figure out the rest. I don't need government to tell me what to do, but that's just me, a rugged individualist. I really believe if the economy is going good, we got a chance to figure it out ourselves. So, you decide, is Donald Trump, even if you hate Donald Trump, how can you vote for Joe Biden? Joe Biden is incompetent. He always has been, but now even more so. But what do you want in the middle? Do you want, for instance, the democratic values, like defund the police? Is that what we need, for the police to be totally defunded? How about abortion? I don't care what side of the issue you're on, Do you want abortion? And I say this for exaggeration a little bit, but I tell you, one of my axioms here is that the progressives will always take things to the extreme. Remember when abortion was safe, legal, and rare? That's what they kind of touted it as. Now it's like, we make the baby comfortable after it's born before we decide to kill it. I mean, how long does a baby have to be alive? Because I guarantee you there are progressives out there, and you think I'm kidding, but I'm not, that think you should have abortion right up till they pass kindergarten. So, What is it? Are you for burning the MFer down? Burn that mother down, talking about our country? Did you see the Black Lives Matter leader? One of the leaders talking about if we don't get what we want, we're going to burn this system to the ground. I take them at their word. I tell you all the time, you don't have to. One thing about the combination of progressives always going to the extreme and Trump derangement syndrome that they're all suffering from now, take them at their word. They are emboldened enough to tell you what they want. So when that Black Lives Matter guy looks you in the eye, in the camera, and tells you if we don't get what we want, we're going to burn the system down. Not my words, his words. Take him at his word. If Joe Biden is elected, that is a part of burning the system down. And by the system, they don't just mean your home. They mean our entire way of life, our constitutional republic. Well, we can't keep it. Ben Franklin, what he said about, I gave you a republic, you can keep it. We're not going to be able to keep it if we elect people like Joe Biden. I firmly believe that. Here, talking back to Republicans, this is a day when I'm going to criticize some Republicans. Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley, a Republican, warned in a tweet Friday that Trump is risking his reelection campaign and called on somebody with access to the Oval Office, don't you have a little bit, to read a recent editorial in the Wall Street Journal entitled The Trump Referendum. I've read it, that argued that President Trump has reverted to his worst form and may be headed toward an historic repudiation that would take down the Republican Senate with him. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all that matters to somebody like Chuck Grassley. He is a swamp rat. Now, I'm not saying he hasn't done some good things. I'm not saying you'd better off with a Democrat up there. That's not what I'm talking about. But Chuck Grassley has been in the U.S. Senate, let alone other offices, but in the U.S. Senate for 39 years. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that is one of the biggest problems we have in our country is the U.S. Senate is totally, and I mean totally corrupt. By that, I don't mean they're all on the take, although a lot of them are. I mean the fact that they've been up there forever and a day, including Joe Biden, who's been in office between vice president and Senate for like 50 years. But they got the solution. A good buddy of mine, kind of a mentor of mine, Tom, howdy, how are you? You know who you are. He used to say that we only have one party in this country, the party of big government with a left wing and a right wing. And I think he's absolutely onto something, especially when it comes to the top. Do you really think there is that much difference between Chuck Grassley and Chuck Schumer? Really? You think there is? I don't know. I'm not convinced that there is. They're just waiting for their turn at the trough. That's all that matters. They believe that presidents come and go. And they believe, as the Brits say, they're hoping that Donald Trump will be a one-off. Because think about this. Do you really believe that there aren't senators? I'm even counting Mitt Romney and, some of those others up there. But there aren't senators, Republican senators right now, that as long as they hold on to their seats, it wouldn't bother them much if Trump got defeated. They don't understand the MAGA people. They fear you. They don't understand you. They fear you more than Donald Trump because they know that one way or another, Donald Trump is done either this term or the next, and he's done. And when you're up there for 39 years like Grassley or Schumer and those guys, does it really matter who the president is at any given moment? Because it's going to change. They're going to be there, and the presidents come and go. I'm just telling you that's the problem, draining the swamp right now. And the last best hope we have to draining the swamp, and I'm not saying that President Trump couldn't and shouldn't have done more. I think he's done a lot considering what he's up against. But I think even those who want the swamp to stay filled would tell you right now, if they were honest, that our only hope for draining the swamp is to reelect Donald Trump. Because the Chuck Grassleys of the world, they ain't going to do it. But here's what Grassley went on to see. We want to have more good Supreme Court justices or the best economy in 50 years like we have. So at least he's giving Trump a little credit. If he doesn't follow that advice, in other words, Donald Trump, and I agree on point with the fact that the president, as I said earlier, needs to articulate a vision for the future a bit better. I agree with that 100%. But Grassley tweeted referring to Trump's record of getting conservative justices appointed. Now, the conservative justice to like the appellate courts, time will tell if that's good. But conservative justices to the Supreme Court, We could do a whole show on that. Let's just say over the course of the last couple of days, it hasn't helped the morale of true conservatives to see what's happened on our courts with conservative judges. So, I'm not saying we don't want more of them, but I'm not so sure that we've gotten what we hoped for to start with. That's another story. Flouting all the recommendations of public health experts, talk at this CNN article talking about President Trump, and here in this case, Pence refused to say that Americans should wear masks, which is so far has proved to be the simplest, most effective way of showing transmission of the virus. And I keep hearing that, but they're not basing it on science. Or what science are they basing it on? Because I hear it all over the map. Even Fauci has been all over the map on masks. He was for them. What was it I guess Kerry, remember I was for it before I was against it? That sounds a lot like establishment people are always like that, and Fauci's no different. But let me just tell you about the mask, and I'm not condemning the mask, but have you seen how most people are wearing them up on the head, off to the side? But the ones that get me are the ones that wear them below their nose. Like that actually does anything. Trust me, the majority of people wearing masks and some of these makeshifts, fashion statements, they're not doing anything, man. Biden, by contrast, has said he would require Americans to wear masks. It says more than 70% of Americans said masks should be worn in public places most of the time, always, in a Pew poll last week. So are we going to go with polling or science? Because to me, if you're talking about the science of masks, what does the opinion matter? It doesn't matter. And maybe I'm looking at it a bit wrong. Maybe we could all stay home and wear a mask if we did like Joe. If we had a son, or even him, his family, and his brother and all that, if we were making millions and possibly billions of dollars from China and Ukraine, maybe we could just all stay home. If they give me $1 billion deal from China, I'll be happy to hang out in the basement in a mask for a little while. I'd probably invite a few people over. But, Joe Biden's got it made, man. He's got it made. We could all stay at home. And, how long do they want us to wear these masks? They want us to all stay at home and wear a mask until Wednesday. You know which Wednesday? The day after the Tuesday election. And they're also setting up this thing when they're talking about the voting and everything else, and the mail-in voting, and Donald Trump doesn't want to leave the White House and he quit, and the polling is just so out of whack, he might as well just call it a day. They want it to be that the cheating that they're planning on doing is going to be accepted because, look, hey, we didn't cheat. The poll numbers showed that Biden was leading in a landslide. The fact that he won by 3 votes or whatever, that ain't cheating. And all you need to know about the cheating is 2 things about Democrats. First of all, have you ever, and this is another challenge. I put these challenges out there, getting no response, so let me know. Have you ever heard a joke about dead Republicans voting? I hadn't heard one of those dead Republican jokes. I've heard a lot. Now, Republicans are real popular with Democrats once they are dead, like John McCain and people like that. But I never hear a joke about how Republicans got a bunch of dead people to vote. You hear that about Democrats all along. And that second thing, have you ever heard a situation of these mysterious ballots just showing up in the trunk of a car? They just floated down the river and there they were. If a Democrat was leading, have there ever been any lost Republican ballots? You only hear about these, we just found these ballots. When a Republican is ahead of a Democrat, all of a sudden they come down, hey, making it rain ballots. You never hear. So the jokes and the ballots, that tells you all you really need to know. Check my time. We're going really long here on this one. I'm sorry about that, but it's important, man. I was going to talk about, let's see here. I want to talk about the old, I'm going to save that one for another day. I want to get to this. I'm going to skip all the way to the third story about America Police State. I was going to talk about Cuomo saying that Trump's naive about the thing, but I don't want to talk about that. If I got to get one, I want to get into this one. So, Billy Bob, we're going to move to the last story. Is America becoming a police state? And this is from The Hill. It's by a gentleman named Elias Yusuf, and he's an opinion contributor to The Hill. I don't know that much about him. But he's been all over the world, apparently, and represented stuff. In repressive states across the world, I have often watched with deep dismay the response of foreign military and police forces towards political reform movements or popular mobilization efforts. Is that, I guess that's what you call it. I don't know. Doesn't seem to make much sense to me. In many cases, he said, he's basically making a case that we're in a police state. He said in many cases he's observed over in Europe, brutal tactics sometimes made possible by U.S. equipment are used to stifle civil society and to guard against the regime in power from criticism, accountability, and reform. Yet even as a member of an organization that tracks, scrutinizes the police and behaviors U.S.-backed foreign policy and security, he said he's never seen it like it was in the United States. And he talking about how they're police state here because they're trying to keep the statues from coming down. He talks about how President Trump cleared out a mostly peaceful protest, which I tell you, mostly peaceful means somebody got killed or hurt. But I want to play this short video. Actually, the video is about 6 minutes long, but we're going to play about 2 minutes of it. This is Bob Johnson, who has become a hero of mine. He's the founder of BET, and he's the first black billionaire. And he said some interesting things over the weekend about how black people look at the tearing down these Confederate generals and stuff. Let's play that real quick, if we can.
Statues trying to make a statement are basically borderline anarchists, the way I look at it. They really have no agenda other than the idea we're going to topple a statue because what? It's not going to close the wealth gap. It's not going to give a kid whose parents can't afford a college money to go to college. It's not going to close the labor gap between what white workers are paid and what black workers are paid. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to take people off welfare or food stamps. It's people having fun that they can go out and pull down a statue and have the mistaken assumption that black people are sitting around cheering for them, saying, oh my God, look at these white people. They're doing something so important to us. They're taking down a statue of a Civil War general who fought for the South. Black people, in my opinion, black people laugh at white people who do this. The same way we laugh at white people who say, we got to take off the TV shows. We got to, the Dukes of Hazzard. I'll bet you if you go back and look at the Nielsen ratings when the Dukes of Hazzard were on television, I'll bet you it had a huge black viewing population.
That's good enough.
That's the one thing.
He even went on to talk about how he was a big fan of Beverly Hills, but he said black people watch more TV statistically than whites, so if it's a show is highly rated, that means black people are listening to it. But I tell you, Bob Johnson is right about that, man. Most black people, they got a lot more problems as Americans do in general than what's happening. Trying to find out, especially right now, how to feed the kids, how to get a good education. You want to do something for black America, and I think I feel confident in saying this, go repair the schools in that neighborhood. I mean, in Baltimore, for instance, where I said only one, not even one, mostly African-American students were proficient in math and English, not a single one in the public school system in Baltimore. You can tear down all the statues you want. Unless you fix that, you're never going to solve any problems whatsoever. And then he goes on to talk about how President Trump had called out the military, mostly in D.C., but how they use National Guard and places like this. Back to this opinion piece, not Mr. Johnson, just want to make clear. And the reason why they've had to do that is because guess what? And it's mostly Democrats. Governors and mayors hadn't been doing their job. So what do you expect the president to do? Just sit back and watch America burn? Now, I'm one of the ones that have said the president probably should do more, but I understand the trap they're putting him in. They want him to react so they can. But the reality is they're not patriotic Americans because they're putting politics above their own citizens. I mean, in Minneapolis, for instance, I don't know if you saw talking about all this virus spike. There's a spike in the virus among young people in Minneapolis, but they want to blame that on Trump when the reality is it has to do with the fact that they've been in the street neck and neck with each other for the last month or so. That has a lot more to do with it. I'm almost out of time. I got one more quick video I want to play, so we're going to scroll all the way to the end here. I got this video. I got to set it up for you. It was over the weekend. I don't know a whole lot about it, just a little bit what I heard in the news, but it is a couple, and they're white, and they're obviously by the house they're standing from in a very affluent neighborhood in St. Louis. Apparently, a Black Lives Matter protest or whatever they were doing went into this private neighborhood, and these people came out, because one of the things I tell you, well, let's play the video real quick and we'll show it. Look at these people defending their home. Check it out. I think we've seen enough. In case you didn't notice it, that guy had some type of, quote, assault weapon there. I don't think it was, there's no such thing really as assault weapons. The AR, by the way, doesn't mean assault rifle. It means, or it has to do with the way it's manufactured. Anyway, you see the man out there with his rifle, and the woman out there, you can't really tell, but she's got a pistol in her hand. And the one thing you know for sure, you hear them other people saying, let's go, let's go. Ain't no paint going on that house. And hopefully these people won't be harassed again. I would be surprised if they don't target them. Unfortunately, that's the country we're living in. But here's my big concern, and I say this to people: if you hate Donald Trump, you still should have this concern. We got an all-volunteer military and a police force that is underpaid, let alone cutting $1 billion from them out of New York. What if we become the very S-hole country that they criticized Donald Trump for talking about in the past? Let me simplify this. What if we become a country for our military that is not worth defending, or a country for our police officers that is not worth serving? And we are becoming that. I'm not hoping for it. We are becoming that. And I can tell you, if I got a choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden and giving up and taking a knee and not being able to defend my home, let alone save the U.S. Constitution and this great nation, the greatest experiment ever, while I battle ignorance and apathy every day. If I got a choice between Make America Great Again, and Joe Biden in the basement, I'm taking President Trump, derangement syndrome or not. I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it and share it with others. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. By God, we all should agree that we need to pray for this great nation. But as I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.